When a depressed Barry first stumbled upon the amateur acting class of Jean Cousineau while carrying out a hit on one of the students, he believed he'd found new purpose. Ready to leave his life of killing behind for good, Barry traded in handler Monroe Fuchsia's, Stephen Root, for an equally self-absorbed, egotistical mentor, this time in the form of washed-up actor Jean. When Jean later discovered the horrors of Barry's double life at the end of Season 2, and even when Mr. Cousineau teamed up with Jim Moss, Robert Wisdom, to set Barry up for his arrest at the end of Season 3, Barry still believed the two shared a deep, father-son love for one another. But it wasn't a trick, and in the final moments of wow, as Barry finds himself staring down the barrel of a .38 special revolver with Jean on the other end, it finally hits him. Not just the bullet, but the matter-of-fact realization that out of everyone who's ever tried to kill him, Chechen mob bosses, a taekwondo master, his opposition in the military, biker gang members, and more, it's Mr. Cousineau who will end up pulling the trigger. As the curtain closes on the crime dramedy Barry, here's a breakdown of everything that happened, and whether it's worthy of a standing ovation. No matter how hard Barry tries to distance himself from his profession as a hitman, he can't seem to escape his past. After his hit on acting student Ryan Madison, Tyler Jacob Moore, goes wrong, Barry finds himself in debt to the Cheyenne mob. Just when the police close their investigation into Ryan's death, and Barry thinks he's gotten off scot-free, lead investigator and Jean's new romantic partner Janice Moss, Paula Newsome, makes a realization about Barry's involvement. Before she can turn him in, Barry kills her and spends the rest of Season 2 trying to hide his truth in more ways than one. However, Barry can no longer keep up the facade when Fuchsia's reveals to Jean that Barry is Janice's killer. In Season 3, Barry has hit a new rock bottom, and the pursuit of acting no longer remains a priority. While he's busy trying to keep Jean silent, Fuchsia's is out exposing Barry to all the families of Barry's victims. One of the people Fuchsia's approaches is Jim Moss, Janice's father, who teams up with Jean in an elaborate setup to catch Barry red-handed. In the fourth and final season, an imprisoned Barry escapes and starts a family with series-long girlfriend Sally Reed, Sarah Goldberg, while they both run from the law, now with a son in tow. But even after 8 years of freedom, Barry can't help but be pulled back into his killing ways when a movie about his crimes threatens this new life. While Barry is in LA on a mission to execute Jean for his involvement in the movie, Sally and their son John, Zachary Gollinger, are taken hostage by Chechen mafia leader NoHo Hank, Anthony Kerrigan, who hopes to lure Barry to his death in retaliation for Barry's repeated betrayals. The unlikely duo of Fuchsia's and Hank team up, but instead of killing Barry, the two gangs end up in a shoot-off with each other, leaving Hank dead. Fuchsia's shields John from harm, and the two walk away unscathed. When Barry arrives on the scene, he's greeted by John as Fuchsia's watches on in the shadows before disappearing. Now reunited, Barry, Sally, and John are ready to plan the next chapter of their lives, but Sally is concerned about Jean being set up for the murder of Janice. She urges Barry to turn himself in, but when he refuses, Sally disappears during the night, taking John with her. Barry goes to Jean's house looking for his family, doesn't find them, then has a change of heart and is ready to turn himself in. Before he can, Jean shoots Barry dead. Another time jump reveals an older Sally, now a single mother working as a high school theater teacher. In the final scene, a noticeably older John goes to a friend's house to watch The Mask Collector, the biographical movie about Barry's life, which portrays Barry as a hero and Jean as the mastermind behind it all. Although John may remember events differently, he can't help but feel relief over his father's distorted legacy. Halfway through Season 4, the characters of Barry go through drastic changes after an 8-year time jump that sets up the question, what if everyone got what they wanted? As it turns out, the grass is always greener on the other side, but for Barry and Sally, who now live in the middle of a secluded desert, there isn't much grass anyway. Now going by the names Clark and Emily, Barry and Sally are raising a son who has no idea about his parents' past, let alone their real names, or his mom's real hair color. This new life and family are all Barry has ever wanted, with breadcrumbs being dropped far back as Season 1, when Barry imagines a future with a kid. Turning to religion, Barry believes he's finally redeemed himself, but the slightest threat to his new life sends him right back to his old ways. For Sally, her decision to run away with Barry was rooted in safety. a feeling she'd been chasing long before Barry entered the picture. Between her abusive ex-boyfriend, her toxic family, and the trauma of killing someone in self-defense, Sally only feels safe when she's with Barry. But with accumulated trauma, guilt, and regret, Sally falls into depression and alcoholism. Her situation becomes so desperate that she nearly turns herself into the police after following Barry to LA, then again in the finale when she urges Barry to turn himself in. Read more. https://www.looper.com/1302059/ending. HBO's Barry explains/. On the surface, it seems like Gene Cousineau has returned to LA as a changed man after hiding out in Israel for the past 8 years. When the biographical movie about Barry is announced, Gene comes out of hiding to try and put a stop to the glorification of Janice's death. However, this new mindset doesn't last long. When a man posing as Daniel Day-Lewis's agent contacts Gene about the actor portraying him in the movie, Gene reverts to his narcissistic self, leading to his downfall. Meanwhile, Fuchs emerges from prison, now embodying the persona of the Raven, and finally gaining the respect and control he believes he deserves. After near-death beatings by the police trying to extract information about Barry's whereabouts, Fuchs impresses the other prisoners with his loyalty and toughness, despite not actually knowing where Barry escaped to. Fuchs gathers his gang and approaches Hank, who has now successfully achieved status as the leader of a lucrative construction sand empire. But at what cost? Fuchs is looking to offer his services in exchange for Barry. It's assumed he's planning on getting back at Barry for leaving him for dead in prison. But when they meet face to face, Fuchs surprises everyone by saving John and returning him to Barry without any trouble, possibly making Fuchs the most redeemed character of the series. He was always a conniver and a ne'er-do-well, and once he got this respect, it changed him. That's kind of the central theme of the show. By the end of the show, everybody has been changed into somebody else, Root says of the final scenes with his character. When leaders of rival Chechen and Bolivian mafias, Hank and Cristobal Cifuentes, Michael Irby, made their relationship official in the first episode of Season 3, Forgiving Jeff, it thrilled many. By the end of the season, the forbidden lovers are finally free of their oppressors and spend the first half of Season 4 investing in the lucrative business of construction sand. With the help of some rival gang members, Hank and Cristobal are on their way to leading their own empire, until Hank goes behind Cristobal's back and kills off their associates at the demands of the Chechen elders, nearly killing Cristobal in the process. Appalled by Hank's actions, Cristobal breaks things off during a tearful sequence, but as Hank tries to warn, Cristobal knows too much. Cristobal walks out the door and is killed on the spot. Even after the time jump and fully embracing his violent side, the death of the love of his life hangs over Hank's guilty conscience. At the center of Nohobal Industries, a gold statue commemorating Cristobal stands tall, representing Hank's denial. During the standoff between Fuchs and Hank, a newly transformed Fuchs insists Hank own up to the horrific killing of his lover. Unable to overcome his shame, Hank doubles down and chooses death over honesty. With Hank in those final moments underneath the statue of Cristobal, Kerrigan says of the scene, it's him seeing very clearly what he has lost in this life based on those choices. There's something beautiful about him ending it holding Cristobal's cold metal hand, but there's something really terrifying about it. Lying in their motel bed together with their son sleeping between them, Barry and Sally have the opportunity to continue hiding from the law and start the next chapter of their lives, something Barry considers to be proof of his redemption. They've been given a second chance, and he didn't even have to kill for it. But Sally sees things differently. The only way to be redeemed, she tells Barry, is by taking responsibility for what you did. She insists Barry turn himself in to spare Gene from taking the fall for Janice's death. Barry isn't interested, and during the night, Sally leaves with John. When Barry goes looking for his family at Mr. Cousineau's house but is unable to find them, he realizes he has no other choice. He decides to turn himself in. He never gets that far. Whether or not Barry would have gone through with finally leaving his life of violence behind and taking responsibility doesn't seem to matter in the end. Hollywood has decided to uphold his questionable legacy of redemption.